Welcome to the Gathering Place. I'm Tom Ray, and so good to have you here today on this beautiful Sunday. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and it's a great opportunity to gather around the screen and settle in with us for a little while as we discuss conflict in marriage. So this is going to be a good episode today. We wanted to encourage you to like on and share this content with your friends and neighbors and invite them to be a part of what's going on right now, even in this moment. Do a watch party, invite them to be along with us on this ride. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Ben and Laura Bookie, as well as Ken Shelton, our hosts for today. So Ken, you want to take it away?
I sure do. Thanks, Tom. It's nice to, I'll say this by faith. It's nice to see you all. Even though I can't see you all and you can see us, it's great to see Ben and Laura and Tom. And it's nice to be able to talk about this subject of conflict. We all experience it, and we experience it not just in work or friendship situations, but also in our marriages. And we want to talk about three things specifically tonight that will probably expand a little bit. But before we get too far down the line, I would like for Ben and Laura, if they would, to take a moment and tell us about the marriage conference that's coming up.
It is on September 20th and 21st. I was going to say it weird, 21. But um, it's $40 per person. And go ahead.
So tickets, the easiest way to get to them, you can look on Eventbrite because that's what we're selling them through. But if you go to our website, quiescounseling.com, QUIES counseling.com, there's a link there for it. And you can go to the conference tab in that. It includes lunch on Saturday. So if you're thinking it's a lot of money, you get fed. And there's snacks and like coffee and stuff Friday and all day Saturday. And you get to listen to all four of us and a few other people. Lisa Gonzalez, Wes and Christina Starr. Is that it? What am I forgetting?
Tom's wife.
Tom's wife's going to be there.
Yeah.
So they're gonna sing. So so a lot of really fun, exciting things planned. So you might hear snippets of like what I'm going to talk about, unless I totally change it, because that could happen. But so tonight it's a sneak preview. So.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to being there, and I hope to see some of you folks there. So let's get right into our subject about conflict in marriage. This is actually an extension of the discussion we had last week. And so we want to pick up from there and talk about ways, are you ready? That conflict in marriage might be different than conflict in any other relationship. Well, first of all, let's just say that any and everything that happens in marriage is different than any and everything that happens outside of marriage. Marriage is I hear music or something, don't I?
It's wind chimes.
Yeah.
It's real windy out.
He's like, am I hearing music?
Well,
I can't hear anything.
No, we can't hear anything either.
I'm sorry, folks. That's my ADHD kicking in. But I thought that it was the ice cream man.
Yeah.
Oh, ice cream. No. So marriage being a sacred union and bringing two people in very close proximity about everything that goes on in their worlds is rife with opportunities for conflict. And so we're going to talk about that, ways in particular. So let me pose this question to Ben and to Laura to talk about for just a minute. Why is it exactly that when we first are married, we're, we call it the honeymoon phase, when we have so many blind spots. Why is it that that thing fades? What is it? What are the precursors for that thing fading and then real life showing up and where did the honeymoon go? And
Mhm.
why, let's talk about that for just a minute. Why does that happen?
I think reality sets in, right? And you have to share this space, legally share this space with another person that has total background difference, family, everything. And then all of a sudden you're sharing the space with them. And then you walk in the bedroom and they're laying on your pillow. And it's a real thing. It happens to people.
Yeah.
And I think
Matt.
all those differences finally hit, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
and it's so easy to overlook that when all those endorphins are going and you're like so in love. Um, and they actually have researched this, and I can't even remember the specific details because they looked at chemicals in your body and your brain and all those things. But um, like the average honeymoon period is 2 years, like give or take, I don't remember. And that's not really that long. And I think, and we see that a lot in couples, but in most people, what is the 7? They talk about the 7-year itch. Like a lot of people,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden that's when divorces happen. But 10 years is actually a really big year for that. And but I think it is. It's just like we come in with this this view of how things will be, and then it's not. And what do I do with that? And it hurts and it's hard and it's really, really difficult. And all of these things that we believe to be true about what marriage is like and what our marriage will be like, all of a sudden we have to actually address that and be like, oh, that's actually not true what I thought or hoped for.
I think the other piece of it is that, oh no, I forgot what I was gonna say. I was I was reflecting on what Ben said, and then I had a thought when he was talking, but I wanted to make sure I was listening. So there's two one avenue is the only thing that was gonna work. I was going to say, I think though, when you meet people and they say, oh, we don't fight, we don't have conflict, they are either running from it or they're lying to themselves.
Or they don't
Because
know what conflict is.
yeah,
Or they're lying to you.
yeah, are they lying to you? Right? Because I was looking through some of Gottman's stuff. So this is, I don't know if you can see it.
Real
Nope.
glare. There's a glare on it.
The 7 principles for making marriage work, which we often use in our marriage therapy. It's by John Gottman. And one of the things that he says that there's 69% of conflicts in marriages that are unresolvable. 31% can be resolved, right? They're solvable, but there's 69% conflicts. They're just perpetual. And it's things like values, it's personalities, beliefs, hidden feelings, just things that are more of a personal versus it actually being a conflict. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so it's understanding what is just somebody's opinion or what is something that really needs to be resolved.
Mhm.
Right. Years ago, in my father's generation, there was a different set of behavioral tendencies between husbands and wives. Not all of them, obviously, but there was a general trend that the man was the head of the home and the wife was the housekeeper. The man got a job, and the woman stayed home and vacuumed and had a nice hot meal when the man came home, with that whole stereotype that we talk about of marriage, that it's supposed to be that way. And a lot of people still cling to it. But and maybe some who are listening still cling to it. And I have a friend, actually, a really good friend. He may be watching, but his first wife died, and before she died, she picked out his second wife for him, and they got married. And he told me, I said, "Are you happy?" And he said, "Well, let me tell you, she always has a hot meal when I come home." He never answered my question directly. He just said, "She always has a hot meal when I come home." And I thought that was kind of funny. But my point being that in my father's generation, uh, he had this habit, as many men did, when he needed a refill, he just shook his coffee cup. And my mom got the coffee cup and went over and filled it with coffee. And, when it was time for lunch, Dad might be out working because we had an operating apple orchard, and Dad worked nights on supervision for Pontiac Motors. But during the day, he was working away in the apple orchard or on his equipment or whatever it was. And if Mom was doing something, she'd say, "Oh, I have to hurry home and make a sandwich for Dad," as though he couldn't make one for himself. And you know what? He couldn't. He couldn't. He probably could, but there was a total either willful or ability related disconnect uh, that kept the bread from meeting the mayonnaise and the lettuce and the ham and the cheese. It didn't work. He was never mean about it, never ever mean about it. My dad was an impeccably uh, focused husband and gentleman. I mean, to the point where my dad just really wanted to be a good man, and he was. But the first time he shook that coffee cup at my wife, my daughters looked at each other and looked at my dad, looked at me, looked at my wife, because my wife just sat there. And when he shook it again, she said, "You want some more coffee, Dad?" He said, "Yeah." She goes, "It's over there in the coffee pot. Just go ahead and help yourself." And he turned all shades of red. He got up and got more coffee. And she just went on about her thing. And so it's just, and my mom was over there with a little smile on her face, and just a different approach to things. But embedded in that, the man, usually had the prevailing opinion about everything. Not that, not that there couldn't be discussions about things, but if Dad voted a particular way, so did Mom. If Dad had a feeling about something in society, so did Mom. If there was a schedule to keep, Mom was just fine with it. It was just the way it was. And I'm sure they disagreed. I grew up in a home where never one time in the 20 years I lived at home did I hear my mother and father argue, raise their voices, or for that matter, ever disagree. Ever in 20 years. I'm not saying they didn't do it. I never heard it. And I asked my sister the other day, and she said, nope, never heard it. They just didn't do it. And so, because Dad was right. And you remember the TV show Father Knows Best? That's it right there. So there were not that many conflicts. And you know why? Because Dad was right. Now, my wife's parents were a little bit different. They were not your average church-going couple. They were from West Virginia, really nice folks. He'd been a coal miner for 18 years. Now he was a steel fabricator. And her mom worked from the home as a hairdresser. And she was a hardworking woman. She kept a house, and she was a wonderful cook, but she never met a roast she couldn't make into shoe leather. I'll tell you that right now. But she was a wonderful cook. I mean, those homemade yeast rolls, and I mean, she was a Southern cook, but she operated on that Southern idea that you gotta get the meat all the way done. And Kitty's dad came in from work one day, and he said, "Well, what's for dinner, hun?" And she said, "Oh, I made that beef roast for you." And he didn't say anything, and washed up and came to the table, and he made some comment about the shoe leather on his plate. And she said, "You really think that's true?" And he said, "Yeah. In fact, you always." So she said, "Okay, that's fine." So the next day he came in from work and she said, "What's for dinner?" And she said, "Whatever you want to fix." And the next day she said, "Whatever you want to fix." And she just went on strike, man. She wasn't going to cook because he was insulting the way she cooked that beef roast. So my point being is not all generations of people or people who were affected by prevailing views in a former generation are going to noticeably have the same number of conflicts or the same kinds of conflicts as other couples, especially if you're into second marriages or blended families where people are no less in love, but there's just a lot more to deal with. So can we talk about that for just a second? How is it in a blended family, a blended marriage, when one or both of the parties has been married before, or there are children from other relationships brought in? Are there more opportunities for conflict?
I would say
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say yes. Um, when we got together, the boys were, I think it was 9 and like 12. So yeah, there was just a lot more, especially when I was a single mom for quite a while. So I mean, you let a lot of things kind of slide. You deal with what you need to deal with, but then you've created, this these kids that are just kind of feral for a minute. I shouldn't say that. My kids are good kids, but
Oh yeah,
if I
they're
get
good.
good.
But
um,
Ben was kind of 1 against 3 here, for a minute.
yeah,
What were you?
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we did something maybe a little different just because, um, before we were married, Delora didn't live here, but the boys did. so, so
So they could start school in the
yeah, for
school
school,
system.
and so for a minute, like I was kind of just like the single dad. Not that Delora didn't come over every day, but so I think that helped a little bit with our transition. But there's still just very culturally different things, in the families and the expectations, and so like I'm ratting Delora out, but like our oldest, she was still laying out his clothes for school. He was 12. And I'm like, what?
It was so much easier. It was just so much easier. I'm just going to be honest with you.
And the oldest was fine once he realized he had to pick out his own clothes. He could actually match things. The youngest could not. Still really can't, but he does better.
That's just he's just one of those people.
But but so it's different. And I mean, there's those typical things you expect that arise, that the whole "you're not my dad" thing, even though their dad really wasn't around, but still got a little bit of that. But not sure what else I was going to say, but they, so there's conflicts that still would arise in all of those things, and so. And even just like we had different ideas about like, well, how do you parent? It's a big source of conflict in any marriage, right? If you have kids, you've got very different ideas about how to parent because a lot of it's based on how you were raised. Either I'm doing it like that or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too, because we have one boy in my sibling group, so there's 5 of us with the boy in the middle, right? When you have more girls, it looks different than when there's boys. And so I remember one day talking to Ben and Philip. This is when the boys weren't living here, but we were at the one house, and I got really upset with Philip, our youngest, because he's spraying the deck off with water. I don't know why I got so upset about it, but Ben's like, I would have let him just do it. I'm like, you would have. Because you know what I mean? It's just that whole, well, I guess it's okay. I just was thinking wasted water, blah, blah, blah. But then was like, if it keeps them quiet, let them do it. So I know it's a really simple thing, but to me, I just didn't understand. So
Tom, you're
Yeah.
nodding your head a lot there, brother. Talk to us.
Well, certainly. I think what it boils down to in every situation that we've been discussing so far is expectation versus reality. And when we don't discuss those things ahead of time, we end up running into conflict. And so that's why, for instance, those who are considering getting married, premarital counseling is so important so that these things can be hashed out. Who will handle the finances? How will you, correct the kids? How will you raise the kids, and things of that nature. And so without those being developed, then you go into this relationship with an expectation, and when it's not met, or if there's opposition that comes to it, there comes the conflict. And so, a lot of times in a blended situation is to Laura's case, you've been raising kids on your own, a kid on your own, and then someone else comes into the scene and goes, no, wait a minute, this is not quite the way I would do it. We need to have a conversation, right? Because there's something different going on. Our oldest son is not my biological son. So, I certainly have experience in that department. And his dad was in the picture, and our son would go off to his house, every other week or so. And so there was a different way of raising children at their house versus ours. We just had different set of rules or values or whatever the case may be, and so it was different. And so there was conflict, and how to adjust with that, and dealing with that aspect of it, on top of dealing with our own relationship issues, and I was fortunate that my wife was really influenced by my mom and dad. So I really had, I had the pick of the litter, and I really hit the jackpot with my wife, and but it didn't come without conflict. She just did things different than I do, and it just took time to find that space where we could, find a way to agree, or at least agree to disagree, and doing it in a way that's obviously going to be beneficial for all parties involved. And so sometimes we have to swallow our pride. Sometimes we have to compromise. But at the end of the day, it's all because we love our spouse, and we want to make the best of our situation as we can. Now, to Laura, you brought up, I think, a little while ago about the fact that we don't talk about things. We don't discuss things. We just kind of lay down and hope they go away. And they don't. And they end up coming up again and again, or maybe years down the road. It's just that we didn't discuss it then. But now it's come up to where it's a major problem as opposed to being a little small problem. Like the little light on your dashboard of your car. You go, oh, that's a cool little light there. It blinks every once in a while. but if you don't deal with it, it's going to cause big problems down the road. And so that's a snapshot of conflict right there. And I could go on, but I want to give Ken a chance to speak.
I think that there are normal everyday things that we tend to be able to work out pretty easily. Bill paying, who packs when it's time to go on vacation, who handles the tickets. Things sort of fall out a particular way. Somebody has a strength, and that rises to the top. What isn't so easily negotiated is temperament, moods. Sometimes, we can agree about a thing because it's practical. but it really ticks us off the way that it came across. Or, a person is just really irritated on a particular day. Or maybe they have real mood swings. And then you have another person now in your life. Maybe you got married quickly before you really had to navigate those mood swings. Or um, maybe that person just kind of brought everything under control, but now that you're married, it's all out in the open. And that's very possible. It's very possible to do that. We have great control over our emotions and the way that we express what we feel. And when we want to put our best foot forward, we can check ourselves and say, no, there's a little too much of that, and pull that back in. And what we're really doing is we're just crimping off a leak in the hose, and it's going to show up down the line. But those kinds of really non-tangible things, it's not about how you keep the house. It's not about, do you take a bath or a shower? It's not about, do you clean the tub after you're done? It's not about those things. It's about, why do you always have a scowl when you come in from work?
Right. Especially with women. Oh,
It's really problematic. No, go ahead.
yeah. Especially with women, because we're so, not that men aren't relational, but we always express our emotions. We're very feelings oriented. And
Really?
I think, I think that in that facial changes, attitudes, or even the way things are spoken. Like, are you mad at me? Like, what's going on? Do you have something going on at work? Which Ben works with me. So what
I'd
would
be
that
like,
mean?
my coworker, let me tell you about her.
That's
But
funny.
I think that's why that women come at it from a different perspective versus men, who would be more probably more the mechanics of the relationship, right? Then you want to say?
Maybe. And I think part of it, like one of the things I use a lot with people is we all have lies that we believe about relationships. And there are lots of books, and their lists tend to be pretty similar. They all seem to have like 10, 10 lies, but one has 9. I don't know why 9, but, so I will recommend 2 in particular. So, one is Greg Smalley and Robert Paul, 9 Lives, or 9 Lives. Whoops, 9 Lies. Get the right thing here. 9 Lies that will destroy your marriage, and the truths that will save it and set it free. And another one is, not Brad's first name, Chris Thurman, something like that. Thurman, anyway. And it's The Lies Couples Believe: How Living the Truth Transforms Your Marriage. And things that tend to be in common in those lists are like, my spouse meets all my needs. Can or should, right? Like, and that's not real, nor should that ever be the thing. But I hear that all the time, and and so that creates a lot of conflict.
When we talk to couples, we talk about, is this a you thing or is this a marriage thing? Because sometimes it's just a you thing and you need to work through it individually. Sometimes it's a marriage thing, so I think it's being able to identify, is this a you, or is this, or a couple thing, or is this a me thing?
Mhm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share, when a new baby is born and, the baby makes, poopy in the diaper. Oh, that's so cute. And all of that for the early years of the birth of the child and so forth. But after a while, it becomes poop. right? Can I say that? And so just like when we enter into a relationship, we overlook that thing that's smelly, that's not fun,
Mm-hmm.
and we tolerate it. But after a while, hey, this is becoming a mess now. It was cute. I saw a video just the other day of this woman. She's going, "Oh, look, my husband left his shoes out in the middle of the floor just for me to remind me that he walks in step with the Lord." And then over here is oh, he left the toilet seat up to remind me to always put it down. And, and she said all these things. But, after a while, those things which are cute in the beginning become irritations later on. And especially if we have unresolved conflict or issues going on, then those things you talked about earlier, Ken, about, the bathtub being rinsed out, or the toilet being flushed, or the toilet paper roll changed and put back and replaced, right? And
The
flipped
right
over
way.
instead of under.
Right. Okay, I got a
So,
question. Do
yeah.
you change the toilet paper at someone else's house? Discuss. No, I'm
I
just
don't
kidding.
think I ever have. I try not to use the bathroom at somebody else's house. That's like, a social no-no, unless, if you're not feeling that well, stay home.
Yeah, watching Dumber and Dumber really did that for me.
Yeah.
The scene in the bathroom where she told him later on that it was out of service.
Yeah.
So that's a mistake. But anyway, but those are the things, in the early years, those things are nice and sweet. And we can go on as a spouse thinking, oh, they think, all these things I do are so cute and there's nothing I can do that's wrong. And finally, what's wrong with you? Why are you coming off on me on all these things?
Yeah.
Right? Everything was peachy before, but something went south. And it's not necessarily that the toilet paper roll is the issue. It's just revealing that there is an issue. And if I've always heard this and always experienced this, that the problem is not really always the problem. It's something deeper, or something completely unrelated to that particular event. But we've grown in an area that we no longer have tolerance for those other things that we used to overlook.
I'm going to bring up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to bring up two things that are very sensitive, and if you've got kids, you may want to move them out of the house for a minute. Two things that I think are really important and are involved in every marriage and are sensitive and touchy. Well, one of them is involved in every marriage, and one is involved in a high percentage of marriages. The first one, I'll start with the easy one first. Interracial marriage. I have a number of friends who have interracial marriage. I have a friend who's Irish that's married to a Mexican. I have a friend who's Black who's married to a guy about as white as they get. I know people who I can't say I'm close to them, but I'm aware of their relationship. One party is Indian and the other one is from Ireland. You've got great cultural differences. Those things alone bring a heavy percentage of potential for issues. Just the homework you have to do to be able to enter into that relationship successfully. And I'm going to share one story that some folks are going to feel is distasteful, and that's okay. But I'm going to talk about it. I had a friend, he's passed on now, and he had been married twice before. I knew both of his former wives. They were both pretty high-powered women, and he was of Middle Eastern origin. And so he had sort of a machismo, come on, man's in control. Plus he was short. So Tom already knows who he is because of my description. And I introduced him to another lady, at our church, and she really intrigued him, and they wound up getting married. But in the meantime, and he was essentially a white guy, but his background was Turkish, and both his mother and father were Turkish. Uh, in the meantime, he had really fallen hard for a black woman, and he was just kind of flipping head over heels. And so we had a close relationship, and he talked to me often, and we'd joke and laugh about things. And it was the kind of, we'd known each other for many years. He started coming to the church, but I knew him as a business, in a business relationship long before I knew him as a pastor. He owned a business in our town, and when I was a pastor, I patronized his business, and he was a great businessman. But he said, "Man, I really feel strongly about so and so. And I just feel like, and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I don't know what I think. What do you think? It doesn't matter what I think." And he kept pushing me, he just kept needling. He wanted to know what I think. I'm his pastor. I got to know, what do you think? I knew what he meant. He meant, what do you feel about interracial marriage? And I said, well, I don't have a problem with interracial marriage. I think it's a non-starter. I think that conversation is non-starter. I think interracial marriage is fine. If you want to marry someone of a different culture, a different background, go for it. You guys are happy. That's all that really matters. Just make sure you weigh everything out. And he said, like, what kind of things? What are you talking about? And I said, I don't know. I said, have you been to her parents' house? Do you know her brother? Do you see the way maybe they're meticulous perfectionists about the kitchen? I know quite a number of Black families, Black women who are fastidious about their kitchens. You are not going to leave that in the sink, even if you're a guest. You're not going to do it. And, they'll tell their husband or their kids off, or whatever. I said, I've seen you around your house, man. I don't know if you're going to handle that. I don't know how that's going to work. He said, oh, I don't think it's going to be that way. I said, well, you got to go in and check that out, because that's a potential relationship. He said, well, what else? What else? I said, you're a real fussy guy. Yeah, I am. I said, what are you going to do when you go take a shower and there's hair on the soap that's not yours? I saw that smile, Ben. and he went, oh, that's a deal breaker right there, Ken. I had to say it, because I said, it's going to happen. You two people that are sharing a space, and it's different. And then the other point that is extremely sensitive, and that is especially when it's in a marriage that hasn't been with your high school sweetheart, and you're meeting somebody through a dating service or at work, or maybe it's a second marriage. Sex is always an issue. Early on, sex is wonderful because it's sex. But there are so many opportunities for things to go sideways, from weird smells to, the way a person reacts or doesn't react, or what a person did in their adult life while they were single and how they satisfied themselves. And can you keep up? I know that's tacky, right? But it's real. It's very real. And if you've spent any time counseling, you've had somebody sit in your office that's been married before, and they're very unhappy with their sexual life and their relationship. It's like, we can't talk about it. Why can't you talk about it? Because he doesn't, because she doesn't. When it boils right down to it, she was single for 10 years and she had other ways of pleasuring herself. Now, people have all sorts of spiritual opinions about that, and I'm not going to get into that because that goes nowhere. But what I am going to say is that's something you got to know, because that's an area that you're going to have to be You're either going to be amazing or you're going to be the bench, brought in. And that's hard. That's very difficult. And I know there's 1,000 jokes we could make here. And I'm a big joker and I want to make them right now, but I'm not going to make them because I'm appropriate at all times. And to Laura, you held it in really well there. What do you think about the things I've just thrown on the table?
It's definitely a big subject in sessions, even if it's an individual that
everybody, I told you.
Yeah. That is always going, I'm going to say always, and I know we're not supposed to make absolute statements, but there's always going to be at least some point that somebody's going to bring up, what if they have the sex life, if they don't have the sex life, if what it is. It's
and sometimes I had to put on my therapist's face.
You did a nice job.
He is not mature enough to handle those conversations.
You're like, what?
When I was talking, I was counting the number of times your mouth went up to smile, and you brought it back down.
I try to keep a very straight face.
Yeah, what we can't see is Talora's got her fingernails in his leg right now.
Yeah.
Her hand was on my leg.
Yeah, I was like.
Yeah. So now I'm going to ask this question, okay? This is not a quick fix, is it?
No.
So how do you help couples that are unhappy with their sex life for any reason? I mean, I know that the techniques you use in discussion are going to vary, but do you settle in for the long haul? Because these are long-term discussions, or do you try to ease the tension with other things?
I think partly it depends. I mean, if we're doing like a couple session or if it's individual, how you're going to tackle it. But a lot of times, like with individual, I'm like, okay, you're telling me this, but you haven't told your spouse. Right?
That's the other piece.
So like, let's figure out like how we talk to our spouse about whatever this is, and because they probably feel the same way. And so like, but let's come up with a solution. Like, what's one small thing? I always feel like start small, start something you're sure you can do, whatever it is, and even just things like, well, sometimes you schedule sex. That's always a big thing. They're like, I don't want to do that. It's got to be spontaneous. Well, if you're waiting for everybody to be in the mood at the right time in the right place, you might not be having sex. So,
The other thing is, as an individual, sometimes they will be like, well, my husband doesn't do this. My husband, he never tries to romance me or fill in the blank there. And they said, well, what have you done? Because we put it off on the spouse all the time, but we're not taking the initiative to reach out, meet their love language.
And that's that thing too, I think, where, like we expect, talking about lies that we believe on, it's on one of these lists, we expect our spouse to be just like us. Well, guess what? Talora is not like me. And if she doesn't tell me things that, like, hey, can you do this? I like this. What? Like, how would I know? So, and vice versa. So like we have to be able to learn. We have to learn to communicate those things. Like, and yeah, I mean, there are things like I can talk to people in individual sessions. Like, well, these are things you can try and do, but we're all individuals. We have likes and dislikes, and we have preferences about all kinds of things, and we need to be able to tell each other what those are and not be afraid to talk about it.
I mean, it's the one person you plan on sharing the rest of your life with.
The rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And after, I've talked to you guys before about, like, if I die, get in the coffin, you know what I mean? We're going together. Okay. I'm just kidding.
Threatening.
I know. But why wouldn't you share all those things with the one person? You talk to your girlfriends or your guy friends about certain things like that.
Well, I think trauma is a part of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think some people have a very difficult time talking about anything sexually oriented
Mhm.
when they have endured sexual trauma or physical trauma or
Mhm.
abuse, uh, either in a previous marriage or in their formative years growing up, at either the hands of a family member or a trusted friend of the family. It could be anything. Women who've been raped or physically accosted uh, just generally have a very, very difficult time getting past that. And I know that's a generalization, but I think that the record would show that it's a pretty safe generalization. I really think that women who have been sexually accosted or assaulted are going to see sex completely differently after that event than they did before. And expectations about that for the man are are based on what has been happening, not what potentially it could look like, because men are sexual creatures. They are sort of driven in that area. And I'm not saying women aren't from time to time or some all the time. But men, you can pretty much count on it. And when things change, it can be very, very difficult in a marriage to modify that. And you know, if a person ever needed compassion and understanding and care and love and support, it would be in the years following a sexual assault.
Mm.
Not the weeks or the months.
Mhm.
And some people who were molested uh, in their teen years actually have a more difficult time coping with marriage as an adult uh, than, say, people who were sexually abused as children. In other words, what I'm saying is there's no set parameters on that. We don't really know that there's a one size fits all response for everybody as a child, everybody as a teen, everybody who was raped, everybody who was previously married. Sex is completely different for everybody in terms of how we manage it, and sex has to be managed, just like Ben said. I'm not talking about a schedule. I think that's fine, but it has to be managed. It's part of life. It's just a thing. As the other part of that discussion, and that is interracial marriage. So, in your practice, do you have interracial marriage issues come up from time to time?
Mm,
Sometimes.
yeah.
You see a lot. But even in not right, like Taylor and I both look pretty white. We're both pretty pale, right? But culturally, if you looked at it, very different.
His family's mainly northern. My family's mainly southern, and surprisingly, there's a difference in those interactions. There's a difference in responses.
Socioeconomic status.
Mhm.
Like Taylor grew up very poor. I didn't, but we were just pretty middle class. So, all of those things make a difference, right?
Right.
And can cause conflict,
Mhm.
So, views of money, like, Laura likes thrifting and all that kinds of stuff. I hate it. It's terrible. Don't want to do
Clearance.
it.
Yeah.
Right. And like that's what and like even to this day, like she has a horrible time like buying something new that's not on sale. That I'm like, well, if you like it, get it. Like, as long as we have the money, like,
You know what, Ben? You're going to start getting calls from women right now that want you to divorce to Laura and marry Ben.
not gonna happen. So sorry.
There's a man who said
See
spin.
these right here? They're rated E for everyone.
Put 'em up.
I said before, people like think Laura's all nice, but she's the fighter. I've never
I
been
don't fight
I've never been in
anymore.
a fight in my life. like
not
not
very
physical,
strong.
but so
Yeah,
She's a bruiser.
I think in all these cases that we talked about, from sex to finances, whatever the case may be, is communication. And Ben, you kind of hit on that a little while ago. It's communication, communication, communication. For instance, in the aspect of the sexual relationship aspect, you can't just one day say, "Well, I'm not comfortable with it, so I'm not going to do it anymore." That's just not an
mhm.
option, for the rest of your marriage. Now, if you can't talk about it, it's important to get with someone like Ben and Talora, or your pastor at the very least, to discuss a plan of action moving forward for whatever those issues are in your relationship, but not just, flip the switch and just say, it's just not going to happen anymore, or we're going to be frugal with every single penny from now on, or we're going to spend all of our money from now on and buy anything we want, when we want, and how we want. So there has to be communication, because one thing is, we can't read each other's minds.
Yep.
And no matter how long you've been married, you can't always be 100% sure that your spouse is always thinking in the way that you are, about a certain specific thing. So it's so important. And again, as Talora said, you are in this for the long haul, the rest of your life together. Why would you want to just have something frozen in place that you have to walk? Imagine parking a big stone in the middle of your living room that you have to walk around every single day. That would be ridiculous, but yet we do that in relationships. And communication is so vitally important. And again, if you feel like you can't talk to your spouse, maybe your spouse gets upset when you talk about that certain thing, or whatever the case may be, you may need a mediator, someone else to be a part of that discussion to help navigate that. But you need to talk about it. Don't wait for years and years, bringing unhappiness to your relationship because you just didn't communicate.
Right. And on that, in that idea of communication, one final thought that I wanted to bring up is the tendency of certain passive aggressive personalities to use excuses as a strategy to avoid telling the truth or actually talking about a thing. Excuses, I think, are a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think excuses cause tremendous problems in a relationship and in a marriage. So can we talk about that for just a second? I'm quite confident that you have had to deal with that in your counseling sessions.
Mm-hmm.
You know where I'm coming from. Flesh that out a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. It's no, never mind.
So, all right, let me explain it then.
No, I. Sorry, go ahead.
So we were talking about sex. So let's imagine that a couple is in bed, and the wife, the woman, initiates this particular encounter, and for whatever reason, the husband doesn't want to have sex that night, and that's going to be really weird, right? Because he's always ready. And what's wrong now is when the excuse, like a fullback in a football line with a football, is going to run right through the truth and obliterate it and become nothing. It's a ghost. It doesn't really exist. I don't know, man. Things aren't going good at work, and I just have so much on my mind. That's BS, folks. That is BS. That never gets in the way of sex. I'm telling you right now, that does not get in the way of sex. Those are apples and oranges, right? But it does happen. And what I would like to, if it's possible, explore what is behind that tendency in passive aggression to offer excuses instead of dealing with the reality. When, I know you've talked to plenty of people who are passive aggressive. What
Yeah,
makes
and
people passive aggressive?
not even like just passive aggressive, but sometimes there's just so much shame associated with things like sex, or at least that person's perception, even if it's not about sex, is like, whatever this is, like if I tell the truth about it, I'm going to feel less than, or I'm going to feel worthless.
That's
And
good.
I don't want that feels bad. So if I just say, well, it's this, right? Like, something not really connected to me, right? And then I don't have to feel so bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not recognizing, okay, this is actually causing greater issues with the
Mm-hmm.
excuses. And maybe right, they recognize that's going to cause issues, but that's down the road, so I don't have to worry about it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like as if I can deal with it later, and then it'll be okay, right? But it's not. It never is. And and sometimes there's just topics that we don't have the words to talk about those things, and
Sometimes we just don't know ourselves, really.
Right.
No.
Right. And I was thinking one thing that we didn't mention was that health, especially when you're with your spouse, there is going to come a point where health is going to interfere, if it's with sex, if it's with getting someone's coffee, like your mom and dad. But, there's something that's going to interfere
Mhm.
with the relationship. And it's where can you be at as the spouse, the recipient of it, where you can say, okay, I want to understand. I want to know. And I think having that mindset and those thoughts in the relationship can change that desire to be passive aggressive. And it could change that desire to feel like you have to have shame and hide things.
We have conversations going on in our head all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, when a person is in a situation, just as I've described, or any of another 1,000 possibilities, chances are you've already been thinking about it, imagining it, because you're coming up with a story you've already thought about and prepared for.
Yep.
And so it's a living thing for you, and it's news for the other person. And you're going to bring a living reality from your mind that's not resolved, but you're trying to push the hold button in some area of your life. And the other person, it's so totally unfair when you look at it from that perspective. The other person has no idea the rules are going to change and doesn't even know what the new rule book looks like. And so personally, I think it's a power move. I think very often that is a power move, because when you don't give information that another person wants that's vital, you hold the power.
Information is power.
Yeah. Which is, I think, in marriage, what we really want is to know the person. We want to know their heart. We want to know their feelings. We want to know the who and the why. And when that disappears now, and we can't find it, that's frightening in a relationship. That begins to affect every level of intimacy. So that's kind of where I was going with it. All of these possible differences that we're talking about have the potential to make an uneven playing field. And, marriage will work if two people have really good intentions and are willing to stand in the gap for the other person, I believe. I'm a bit of an idealist, so I don't think there's any marriage that can't make it if both people are willing to try to work at it. You feel the same way?
Yeah.
Am I wrong in that?
We can always, not always, but, most of the time, first session, like in a couple therapy, like, where this is going,
Yeah.
And it really is, it's based on like, how committed are each of them to making this work?
We usually ask percentage wise. You know, how much is your percentage in wanting to make this work?
Mm.
Yeah. And if I can't, they might start low, right?
It's a bargain.
25%,
Yeah.
right? But if we're not able to move that up, right? Well, then it's never going to work.
And it's a heavy load to be the one, and for you to expect one of you to carry the weight of the relationship, trying to always please the other one, always trying to make everything right. It's a heavy weight, and that weight gets to a point where it's like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, because not everything is your spouse's fault.
Mm-mm.
It takes two to tango, right? It's one of those lies, right, that we talked about earlier.
And we're not talking about domestic violence.
No, that's
just want to put
different.
that
Right.
that
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, because domestic violence is a totally different dynamic. We're just talking about typical relationships.
Right. So take that a little further. Domestic violence, just for the sake of somebody who may not fully understand, why is it different?
Because one person demands the power.
Mm.
One person will demand power over what you think, what you feel. They will tell you that maybe you can't even eat things, you can't wear certain clothes, you can't. It's all about power, and they're trying to control
Control,
it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, this has been a stimulating discussion for sure. And, we've touched on a lot of things. And Ben and Talora, I really thank you for sharing your years of experience in therapy and in working with couples and in fielding off the cuff questions like I do when I'm very spontaneous. As an associate of mine once said that he believes that spontaneity always has a time and a place. And so, and it should, right? No, but anyways, thank you for sharing that. And Tom, really great stuff about communication and making decisions based on communication. Tom, you want to close for us?
Sure. Thank you all for joining us today. If you were impacted by anything that we've shared, whether negatively or positively, we'd like to hear about it. Certainly, if you are having some issues in your relationship with your spouse, it's time to have a come to Jesus moment and have a discussion together, or give Ben and Talora a call to maybe set up some opportunity to have a counseling session. And it doesn't mean that you're broken and you need someone to help you per se. But look, we were going out to a marriage conference, my wife and I, years ago, and someone said, "You guys have a great marriage. Why are you going to marriage conference?" Well, because we want to have a great marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes we just need to go and clear the air and have a counseling session, or whatever the case may be, just to clear the air and make sure that we're all on the same track and moving along. So if you need that, Ben and Talora, what's your contact information?
So our website is quiescounseling.com, QUIES counseling.com. All of our information is right on there. And so you can even email us right from the website. So plus, of course, you can get, like I said earlier, tickets for the marriage conference. The link is there as well. I'd encourage you to get those soon, because that is less than 2 weeks away now. And so make sure you do that. And you can see all of us in person, so.
And be blessed.
I know.
Yeah,
plus other people. There'll be good food, good times. So, but yeah, like I always tell people, the marriage conference is for you, even if you're single, right? You're engaged, whatever it is, it's for everybody.
And
Awesome.
if we
Thank you.
really irritated you with any of our discussions, just stay home, okay? Which we don't.
Now, still calm.
You
Well,
can create in the other room or something while we talk.
right.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about anything we've said, it's been Laura.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Try that again, Ken. I think
I
you
was thinking
froze up.
Tom Ray. He was the one that was talking about communication.
No, we just had a big thunder roll out here.
Oh,
Wow.
Big thunder roll, and something happened to shake us up. So anyway, Quiesce Christian Counseling Services, or right?
yeah.
QuiesCounseling.com. Yep. Quiesce Christian
All right.
Counseling
And
Services.
Tom,
What-
what's
Yes,
yours?
sir. Yeah, Pastor Tom Ray, REA at gmail.com is the simplest way to do that. And if you're interested in inboxing us right here on this channel, you can inbox us with your questions or concerns or feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And then, Ken, what's another way they can get in touch with you?
You can email me at kenshelton.info. You can just go there, and there's a little email icon, and you can click there, and I'll get your email.
All right. Well, that's great. Thank you for joining us today. Can I pray for everybody real quick?
Please do.
Let's do that. And Lord, we come to you in Jesus' name. Lord, thanking you, God, that you are not caught by surprise by anything that's happening in our lives. Dear Father, I thank you, God, that you are always on the move. You're always in charge. Even when we don't see it, you're working. Even when we don't feel it, you're working. God, you're working behind the scenes. But sometimes we are just not having our ears attuned to what you have to say. We're not viewing the things that you're laying out before us. But Father, I just pray that you just break through all of that right now and bring your peace to every relationship, your peace that passes all understanding. Father, bring them to the foot of the cross so that they can then embrace one another. Father, I thank you, Father, that you have loved us and you've prepared a place for us, dear God. But even in this time, in this season, in our relationships, we invite you to be a part of that. We ask you to be Lord of our relationship. And Father, we pray that we would have the right hearts and minds as we move forward. And I bless every marriage under the sound of my voice. And Father, anyone that needs help, their Father, Lord, let them reach out and get that connection that they need. And so, Father, I thank you for everyone here today. Bless Ben and Talora and Ken and Kitty, dear Father. Bring healing and power and just a refreshness of the relationship. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.